Hey everybody, hope this video finds you well, and I hope that this video really kicks up your skills to a whole nother level. I am going to throw a bunch of mismatch functions at you today that I think you need to use to be successful as a Power Apps developer, Canvas app using PowerFX in the year 2024. The reason for that is that the setup is that yes, you can use custom connectors. Yes, you can use Power Automate. But inevitably at some point in time, if you think of your skill levels between zero, like I don't even know how to spell Power Apps, to all the way to a subject matter expert, maybe a Power Platform architect, level 10. Somewhere in the middle is a journey, right? And so this video is geared towards those of you that are at least minimally a level 4 to a level 7. So if you're falling into that range, this video is going to be extremely helpful for you. I already assume that you understand a couple of things. Number one, you understand the syntax of JSON. I will explain a little bit as we go. This is not a full-on course of this. I have a video here on YouTube for JSON. I encourage you to watch that. Just go to my channel, subscribe hopefully. Also like this video if you can. And make sure that you go ahead and search for JSON, and that'll give you that video. But the other thing here is that JSON comes in two flavors. I think I want to start there because that's really what this video primarily is about. So if we do, I'm not even going to search, PowerFX, JSON, and ParseJSON. Did a really good job at the spelling of that one. It spells like I do. So, all right, let's do JSON. That's the one we want here. Let's pull this one out. We'll pull this one here, this one there. Okay, I want you to think of your Power Apps or a Power App, your application. And when you're dealing with JSON, I want you to think of it two ways because there's two functions. The ParseJSON is relatively new. I want to use a quick sidebar. I'm assuming that you know how to use the ParseJSON action, which is a text operation inside of Power Automate. When you're using it in Power Automate, it's like really easy because you can feed it JSON and you give it the schema, you copy and paste. And it does this magical thing where now all of a sudden the items inside of the JSON are accessible. You can just go and get them. The ParseJSON function in Power Apps and PowerFX, by comparison, sucks because you have to, as the user, go through and set everything up. And you're going to find this painful. But nonetheless, it's not terrible. It's just, A, you need to know what to do, and B, it's a lot of typing. It's kind of coding, and it's not why we're low-code developers. But it's essential because sometimes you can't get to the information through a custom connector. Sometimes you want to just sling data from your Power Apps to Power Automate. And sometimes the only way to do something is if you were to just pass the whole payload as a string. Very much this is the whole purpose of JSON. It's so that separated systems that aren't connected can talk together using a common formatted type of language, and you can transport data. And with this encapsulated in SSL, it becomes very secure and a way of sending lots of data across the line. So this video is going to show you how to manipulate, package up, and deconstruct the JSON so that you can send these payloads, which is nothing but a string, that is JSON, or the JSON represents some sort of data. So the ParseJSON is data coming into your application. You're going to consume it. This is the painful part. You've got to massage it. You got to kind of tell it step by step. You need to understand JSON. I'm going to give you a simple example today. We'll discuss and talk about more complicated examples, but not really go into them too much. And then the JSON function is for going out or leaving your app. This is where you're going to essentially take a table of data, and that table of data is going to be helpful because then you're going to use that inside the JSON function, and it's going to take that table and JSONify it or stringify it. And then boom, you can send that right on through to Power Apps. You could send it to a multitude of places, which is really, really helpful. It's also good for importing and exporting other stuff. And the other thing that's really important to understand is, you know, YAML and JSON are like the two things under the hood of Power Platform that this is kind of the love language that it speaks. So knowing these two skills is going to take you from a level 4 to a level 8, because we're going to show you a couple of extra functions here today as well. All right, I want you to ignore this for now. I want you to ignore this odd looking syntax as well for now, and this odd looking syntax. What I want to illustrate is we're going to talk about tables. For some of you, we're going to talk about the dreaded ForAll. For those of you who don't even know what it is, you might not even want to fully watch this video because you might get hung up, or you may need to simply go to this documentation, search ForAll, read about it. Minimally, you should be reading these descriptions. That's going to really tell you what the function's intention is, what it's used for, and then you can look at the syntax and some examples and documentation on all of that, which is super helpful to come up to speed. And I don't discourage you from doing that. I'm just saying that if you're really new and beginner and ForAll is freaking you out, then the rest of this video is like going to have you into a panic attack. Okay, so hopefully you're okay, and we're going to move on forward. In addition to that, this is that ParseJSON function that I talked to you about. And here you'll see that I'm referring to this item up here, which is this column on line 3. Okay, and then I'm simply doing some painful management of that, because ParseJSON produces what's called an untyped object. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm saying here is the object. I'm unfortunately still leaving it untyped. I'm going to show you that because I want to show you the problem, and then I want to show you the solution, and I want you to see the different use cases that unfold. So I'm intentionally going to blow this up as we go through step by step, so you can really fully understand this, but I'm trying to give this to you in the most simplified way and then build up a little bit more complex as we go. All right, so let's, first of all, before we even start here, I want to go back to the app. I want to talk about some underlying basic principles. Under the application area, and let me insert a label so I can illustrate what I want to show you. So let me go here to where everybody else goes, and that's on start. Typically, we do something like set, we give it a name, myvar, and then we give it something. In this case, I'll just do hello. Okay? So that's well and good. That's set. I'm going to come over here, myvar. Lo and behold, hey, you see that it says blank. Well, this is part of the problem. Apps on start, when you're writing applications, in this environment, you have to click the ellipsis and choose run on start. When you do, it runs and populates the variable, which you can verify. Hopefully you guys are using this X, and coming over here, I can see my var, and I can view the text, and I can see inside of it. Anyway, this is very, very helpful to come inside the variables area. So with that being said, I now have this here. Let me go to apps, let me go to on start, and I'll, instead of doing hello, I'm going to do hello David. Okay, again, ignorance, it doesn't know what's going on. I got to come over here to app, click the ellipsis, click run on start. It reruns that operation again. Now this happens naturally when the application starts. So this is only a pain in the neck when you're in the development area. All right, we're going to transition away from this. And the reason we're going to transition away from this is that I'm going to use some assumptions, but I want to show you the performance increase. So first of all, let's take this out. And now that it's removed, we see that we get an error. I want you to come over here and explore this formulas area. This formulas area is attributed to this earlier syntax. Remember I said ignore this, and ignore this? And that's why I said to ignore it, because this is where it comes into play. So here is my set var. We can't use this function here. This is what's called named formulas, and there's documentation for named formulas. I encourage you to read it. I'm going to give you pretty much almost everything you'll need to know, almost everything you need to know. And so in this instance, what we need to do is use the myvar in a different syntax. This is more traditional programmatic type of style. And so what you do is, instead of doing the set function, you simply just give it whatever you want to call it, and then you assign something to it. In this case, I want to assign hello David. Now the problem here is there's a subtle nuance in this area that there isn't any other place of Power Apps. Normally when you do 2 or more statements in PowerFX on, say, a button, you have to do a semicolon so that you can do your next statement, and it executes top to bottom, line by line by line. However, name formulas is the same way. We use semicolons, but it's forcing a semicolon, even if you only have one line. See this little squiggly? Named formulas must end with a semicolon. So even though I've only got one line, I'm not going to use anything else. I have to use the semicolon. Now, before I press the key to put the semicolon there, keep an eye on this label when I do. So let me come back here. Let me do this. Bada boom. See that? I didn't have to run anything. Formulas work now. So when you're developing, you can change anything in the formula, anything that you refer to a name formula, instantaneously, boop, 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 boop. So very much so your friend, but it's held, I don't know how they're doing it, and I don't even know how to explain it to you. Maybe somebody at Microsoft couldn't make a comment if you're watching this video. But the point here is that in memory, how it handles in the application, it's like a separate area of memory. That name formulas is very, very performant. Now, there's a caveat I will disclaim. You should still use onStart if you need to create variables or collections that need to be modified, changed, updated, added, deleted, whatever. If it's static, you want to use name formulas. You're going to get so much performance. So I don't know how many times, even today, I still see people that I mentor and people that write Power Apps continue to beat the living snot out of the onStart area. And they do concurrent, and they do this set. Don't do that. Not unless they need to be updated. That's the reason that you should do that. But if you don't and they're static, don't do that. Do a name formula. Very easy syntax. It's just whatever you want to call it and then assign the value. And if it's only one, like you see here, you put the semicolon. All right, with that rant being said and done, we're going to move on. Now, let's go and bring back this. So let's go to App Formulas and let's paste this in. Cool beans. So now we have 2 pieces of information. NF data, and we have a string, and we have this table data that I've created from this string. Now, inside of this string, let me do this like this. Inside of this string, we have something that's just, I could do blah, 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 right? Doesn't matter. If I wanted to do hi, and let's intentionally put in the middle for whatever stupid reason, we wanted a quote. Okay, so I'm going to go back and insert this label again. And come down here to the bottom so we can see this. So if I do insert data, or hi David, whatever, I'm getting an error, right? And so I need to do NF data. Of course it's complaining because my formula is botched. But the way that you use literally quotes in a string is you have to just add a second string. It allows you to circumvent it, okay? And it allows you to, essentially it's called an escape. NF data, see, we got hi David, and we have inside of it that quote. Like I said, I don't know why you would want to do it in a stupid example, but it is there. Okay, so that being said, inside of this string, I need to do JSON. Now, give me an example of proper JSON. Let's see if we can get here. I'm going to use this site anyway in just a few moments. This is Macaru. This allows us to generate data. So in this use case, the format is in JSON. I'm going to leave it there. I'll go back. We'll explain a lot more of this, but I'm jumping ahead just because I want to show you something preview. And let's do something more reasonable. Let's just do 2. This will preview much better. Okay, I want you to notice that all of this inside of here is just text. And if we put this inside of Power Apps as just text, we have a problem. Because inside of this string, we have lots of these double quotes. And this is how you do proper JSON, okay? So all of that, just to come back to here, to pop this back in, I want to show you that this is still proper JSON, but you'll notice I've double quoted on everything. So one of the things that you can do is you can grab this, you can copy it off. I'll go to Notepad++, we'll do this. I don't know, I grabbed all this other junk that I don't need. Here. Good Lord. All right. Come on. Now that we've got it clean, we do a Control F. You could do this in Notepad too. And find a replace function. And what you're going to replace is a quote with a double quote. Okay? See? And that's as good as it is right there. Right? And I could minify this to make it all one continuous string, which is very similar to what you're seeing here. It's all in one line. It's not nicely formatted or whatever. But nonetheless, I want you to... the only point I wanted to illustrate to you there is that is a JSON, valid JSON. It's a JSON string. But those quotes are creating a nasty little problem for us. So we solved that by just doubling up on the quotes. Again, you can take it into any whatever and just replace your single quotes with double quotes and you're good. All right, so that's all that is. Now this is where things get a little bit more squirrely. I'm going to take this, we'll get rid of that. All right, this NF table data is just another variable name. Now what I am doing is I'm creating a table. Okay, now how do I create this table? I'm going to use this string, this JSON string, and I'm going to go over it and I'm going to make a table out of it. Okay, so if I were to come back over here to Mockaroo and just say, instead of JSON, let's do Excel. And I do generate data. And now I get this Excel document. Let me pull this over. You can see that all of the data, we got the ID, first name, last name, email, and IP address, right? It's all in the table format, and that's all it is. And we're going to take that JSON and we're going to convert it into an in-memory table. And so that's what we're doing here with this. So let me get rid of that. We'll keep this here for a little bit. Okay, so that's what this table is. And so I don't know how many rows or columns of data that I'm going to have in any given thing. It could only have one. You could have 2,000, 2 million, whatever. The point is, it's a table. And in a table, what I need to do is I need to go over row by row for each one of those records that's in JSON. I told you I wasn't going to get into JSON that much, but I am going to at least cover some of the basics. Let's do this preview again, because it's fairly small. I'm going to increase this back to 5. We're going to go back to JSON. We're going to hit preview again. All right, the very first thing I want you to notice, this curly brace, that means a record. And if you chase it down, you'll chase it down to here, and that's why I chose this, because it's nicely formatted. It's easier for your eye to see, which wraps your mind's eye around what I'm trying to tell you. So this curly brace is the end, and this curly brace is the middle, and it represents a row in an Excel spreadsheet or in a table. And so inside of there we have column names. So the first column is ID, and you saw this already when I talked about the table. So if I come over here to the downloads, launch Excel again, see? Let's get rid of this, put this kind of side by side so you can understand it. So this is different data, obviously, but nonetheless, you see ID is one. ID is a column. And let me format this as a table. Let's come over. First, let me enable editing. Bring this back over here. Control A. Data, home. Used to be here. Let me get all my buttons. Here we go. Format as table. Let's do something like this would be helpful. Okay, now you can see it more as a table. And let me do this because I don't want to see all this stuff. Remove the filter. Okay. So as you can see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right? Starts with ID, ends with IP address. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ends with IP address, starts with ID. So these are all column names. This is all information. For example, ID could be an integer. The first name is text, last name is text, email would be text, gender text, and IP address also text. So we have potentially all text for all of the columns, or we have a numerical integer and text for the rest of them. So this is when you hear the term or you read in the documentation of JSON, ParseJSON, it says untyped object. What it means is that the column doesn't have a data type to it. You have to tell it what its data type is. And this is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing because if you don't know how to do it and you don't understand data types, this is going to frustrate you to no end. But if you do know data types, and you can understand it, then you can deal with this in a more logical way. And so that's what the purpose of this video is to kind of coach you along on how to do all of this. All right, so the main key here is that these functions in PowerFX, they require data and information. So let's just tear this apart. Table, we just let IntelliSense help us so I can explain this. Table needs to have a record or a table. And in my example of my code, I'm passing in a table. I'm passing in a table of untyped data, okay? So the next function that I had here was ForAll, okay? So if we do ForAll, what does it need? Well, it needs a data source or a table to operate on. So now we've got table needs a table or data or record, and ForAll also needs a data source or a table to operate on. Okay, so there's that. Now we have the ParseJSON, which we covered earlier. So again, let's just ParseJSON. What does it want? ParseJSON wants a JSON string to process. You see the NF data above here? This is that JSON string that we talked about earlier. And we stringified it, that's my coined term, to add the double quotes because we needed to escape them. So that's how we get a nice JSON string. So now they understand why each and all of these are what they are. This will hopefully help you in understanding this a little bit better. So if we start really mostly from the inside out, we could just come over here and deal with ParseJSON, blah, 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 blah. But we do need the ForAll minimally for this. So what we're doing is we're doing ParseJSON, NF data, so we're referring back to here. Now this part right here is part of the ForAll, because if we look at ForAll needs a data source. And so let me come over here and destroy this, and I'll add a comma, because now we're in the ForAll aspect, but it needs a second parameter. And says the formula to evaluate all rows within the table, okay? So right now I'm saying, listen, I need a formula to deal with each row, talking specifically about the columns in that particular, whatever you fed to it, which is this data source. This earlier data source right here, right? So if we did again ForAll, see, it needs a data source or a table, and that's where we gave it this other information. So let's bring all this back again. All right, so the syntax on this gets a little ugly and tricky. I'm gonna put this example that I have here in the description of the video so you can copy and paste and play and learn. And you need to create these brackets. So there's a first bracket here, and this is your second bracket over here. This basically represents, just like JSON, a row of data. And we're doing key values, which is essentially column name and the value for that column. If I had multiple rows, again, I can just double up and I can say, hey, listen, do whatever. But in this instance, I don't have to deal with the multiple rows because this ForAll function is going to do that for me. That's what the iteration means, row by row. So if you don't know what the word iteration means, it just means to loop row by row by row on the table. Okay, so that's all it means, to iterate, to go row by row. Now we're going to take this and we have to do something with it. So in my JSON example, this is where knowing JSON is going to help you. Now, I'm going to help you a little bit further because a lot of times when people do Cody type of things, they have a bad habit of using the same name in multiple instances of it, and for people learning, it blows their mind. They don't know what this is because it's the same name, but it means something very specific in syntax, in context to what it is you're writing. So I'm going to change some names a little bit to make them different. So for example, I just said first. So what I'm telling this is that, look, I'm creating an in-memory table, which is why this table exists, but I have to start naming my columns. And so in this case, I don't want the column called my column first name. I want it different than that because they represent different sides. This first represents the new column name for the table that I'm creating now. This part where it says this record just refers to, hey, for this row of that JSON, because that's what we're talking about, the ParseJSON, for this particular record or this row, I want you to go to the my column. You see when I click on it, it starts highlighting all the similarities. So this key value, so get used to that concept too. This is where I hope you know JSON, because if not, this is going to potentially blow your mind a little bit. But anyway, the key in this instance is the column name. The value is going to be for this row, I'm referring to the source row within the source data, which is this NF data, which we can see here. And this is the data source for the ForAll function. Again, we're working on the second parameter, fleshing this out. So first is my new column. Got the first name here going for that. Now I'm moving on to the second column. I called it second because it's really just going to be a second name or whatever. And then again, I'm referring back to the source column, and I've just changed the names around. All right, so with all this being said, I don't have to run anything. This information should be here. Now this table, unfortunately, only has one row in it. So this is going to be very simple, but it's also tricky. And this comes up a lot. So the reason I didn't add multiple rows, because I want to show you when these situations come up, how do you deal with it? So I want to refer to that data. And I want to do the NF table data. Dot, notice I'm not getting anything. The problem is that I'm trying to specify a value just for the first row for one of those columns. And I know I only have one row to deal with. I can't access it. And the reason you can't access it because I'm trying to access a table value inside of a text object. And so this isn't going to work. So you have two choices. When you know your table only has one row in it, you can either use the first function, which in this case, I'm going to do the end table data, right? So first requires a source. So this is saying, give me the first row in this table. Now something magical happens when I use the dot. If I do first, because that's my column name, that's what you're seeing here. And I'm only bringing back the first row because that's what the first function does. It allows me to see this, okay? Another way I can use this is something called index. Now, if you're not a programmer, I would suggest to use the first, gravitate towards that because it will make more sense to you because I want the first row, right? Well, more plain English. If you're a programmer, you understand indexes, you understand arrays, you understand positions within the within the index. You can use the index, but it also uses a table. But it uses the index ID. Okay, now unlike arrays, which are for you programmers out there, unlike arrays that are zero-based, this index in this index function always starts with 1. Normally, regular arrays, whatever, programmatically, you'd use 0. But that's not the case here, unfortunately. So I hate that when there's inconsistencies in using this the way that is, but it is what it is. Okay, so all I'm saying here, in this case, the index refers to this table, and the index, I want the index, meaning the index is the row. So when you see or hear the word index, I want you to translate that into your mind's eye as row. So again, if you're not a programmer, it's easier to use the first. You don't need all this extra stuff or this second parameter. But if you are a programmer and you're comfortable and you prefer index, you use that. Both accomplish the same thing. So the whole point here is, and the whole reason for going through this rigmarole is how do I get back one row from a table, even though I know I only have one row? You have to do it anyway. And this is how you do it. So this is how you solve that problem. Okay, notice it still says untyped object. So even though it's text and it's in a text value, it works out well. And if I were to change this to integer, it's going to flip out and do some really bad things. Now, the reason that this is data type untyped is because that's what it is. ParseJSON produces untyped objects. Now, how do you fix this? Okay, so let's fix this so that this data type is of type text and not of type untyped. Okay, or not. Well, untyped is essentially. But anyway, okay. So one of the things that I can do here. So when I'm referring to the source data, to convert this from an untyped object to a typed object, we have to tell it what type it is. In this case, it's a text type. So we wrap it in the text function. So we put text and close it up there. Now that untyped is now of type text. I can do the same thing over here. Now, you might be inclined to put it around the whole thing. You don't need to make the data type of the column. You only have to specify the data type of the data, okay? So that's the key where you put this here. If I wanted to refer to an index of 1, 2, 3, 4, and I didn't want it of type text, I literally wanted it of type number. Instead of using the text, I would use the value. And so you should already know that even if you're towards the beginning stages of Power App development, right? So you'd wrap this instead of a text function, you'd wrap it inside of a value. It just turns a string into a number, assuming that you have a character that represents a number. Like the number 1, it's a character 1 if it's text, it's a number 1 if it's of type, integer. All right, so I don't want value, I want text. Again, so we'll do, and I hate that when Power Apps does this. If you use IntelliSense and you select it, it destroys like the first part of your syntax, and it's really bad when it does that. Okay, so the same thing. Now I went from having untyped data, and my technique that I used here, I now made it of type text. Now it is no longer untyped, it is typed. So if I come back over to here, and I come back now over here, see my data type? It's of type text. It no longer says untyped. This is extremely helpful later. Okay, so one more time, let's do this. Power Apps, JSON. Power Apps, PowerFX, JSON.
According to...
No, don't read to me. Okay, so remember the JSON function is for taking tabular data out. The ParseJSON is for taking JSON data in. And so in order to provide, or in order to use the JSON function, so let me pop out a button here. And in the button, I want to go ahead and do JSON. Now, what do I need to do? I need to give it the structure of some sort of a table. So now when I do my NF table data, life is good, okay? This works just fine. But if you find yourself running yourself into this, okay, this works absolutely fine. And if we look, I want you to look at the helpful information right here. This is showing you a preview of what it's done. It has turned my table into JSON, so back into JSON. So now I got the JSON, I've got a string. I can now send this JSON string out of Power Apps into some other system, and life is good. But here's a use case scenario that you're going to run into if you didn't properly type your untyped data. I'm going to remove this type text, and I'm going to remove the closing bracket, which is the ending part of the text function. And I need to remember to remove it here too. Okay, so now I still have a table, but my table data, my column data is of type untyped. And see this error? Now I've got this error on this button. If I hover over, it says the JSON function cannot serialize tables, objects, meaning table or objects, with a nested property called first. All of that means nothing. Here's the key takeaway. This is the part that is important. Of typed untyped object, because that's the real core problem here. That's the fix. You need to type your data that's untyped. And you do that with that text and the value trick that I just showed you, or some other type, float, int, whatever you want to do. Okay, so that is all of that. Now let me show you some more practical use cases on how you might want to use this. We're going to go through a couple of different steps here, and I'm going to pop in my example one more time. I think it's already there, but I'm going to change it up anyway, just in case I've done something stupid. Okay. So now we're back to where we started with that text. Now I want to come over here to Mockaroo. I've got those 5 items in here. This is all well and good. I've got JSON. I want to export this out. I'll just do generate data. This is going to give me a mock JSON. So let's get rid of this. That was the Excel spreadsheet. Now I have this. So I'm going to open this up with Notepad. Again, I'm going to stringify this for Power Apps. So I do Control F, click this little thing to open it up, and I want to replace a single quote with a double quote, and I'm going to hit Replace All. So everywhere behind the scenes that I got these single quotes, I'm going to escape it so that it works inside of Power Apps. Otherwise, Power Apps would just yell and moan and complain. So I'm going to go a little bit faster because we're running out of time in this video. It's probably already 36 minutes long. So now what we want to do is replace this JSONified string. So again, NF data, just a string. Now I'm going to pop my JSON in there. Life is good. I am going to remove all of these records in here. And I'm going to put this now in here like this. And I'm going to give me a couple of hard returns. And from here, I'm going to come over and now I'm going to change this up. So I'll just change this to row ID. And then we're going to do equals this record dot. And I'm going to use this syntax here, dot ID. Okay, so again, I'm recreating a table for in-memory table. The row ID is the table that I'm creating now. The ThisRecord.id is referring to the source data. Okay, I could have just said ID. Most programmers that teach this stuff, again, they use the same name. It gets super confusing when you're learning. This is why I'm not doing it for you. So hopefully this will help make more sense. So first name, let's just go with something more simplified. So let me copy first name. And I'm going to do a hard return here. And I'm going to do just first. We're going to do colon this record dot first name. We're going to add another column because we have more data. We've got email, so let's make this just mail. Okay, and we're moving on. Oh, why does this do this? Come on. Stop. All right, we have gender. I think that's how you spell identity. Dot needs to be dot gender. We need another colon. What else we got? IP address. So we're going to call this one just IP. This record dot, and we're going to type this. No, we're not. We're going to copy it. My typing skills are horrendous. Okay, this is the pain in the ass part. The pain in the ass part's done, right? We took our untyped object. We used ParseJSON to say, here's my JSON. And now I did the heavy lifting, right? I've got my information here. It's still untyped though, because I didn't say what type it is. So now we're going to go through, now that we've got this still untyped, but we've got it formatted out, we got to finish up, and then we're going to be good. So this ID is a number. I want to have this as value. Again, if you use IntelliSense, I don't know why, it will blow this up for whatever reason. So I usually just back out of this and do this like this so that I can preserve what's going on. So the rest of this is just text. So for here, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it there. Identity, this record text, This is text. Close that up. Close this up. Close this up. Again, I'm just putting the closing parentheses on these text functions. Okay, so now I took my untyped data, whatever, collection, row, in memory, JSON, blah, 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 and I've turned it into something usable that is now typed. I have all of my columns and my data types explicitly there. Now I can do whatever I want to do. It's going to be, right now it's static, but I could convert this static into a collection, base a gallery or a form on that in-memory collection. Then I could take that collection, or even this for this matter, if I don't want to do any of that, and I can use JSON, which is now a proper table that I can stringify and send it back out. Okay? So let me just show you that this actually is working, and we'll wrap up this video. So let's do a vertical gallery. And by the way, let's not do a vertical gallery. I want to show you right now as the date of this recording, which is August the 15th, 2024. When using this technique, if you come over here and try to insert a layout item, which is of type table, I don't use the data table. It's in preview, so I think that's why there's a bug. Let me show you this again. So layout, see data table, see how it says preview? There is a bug in this use case. The bug is if I try to say that the item is NF table data, and now I come over here to properties. And by the way, if you ever lose your property panel, it's up here now with a button that says properties. So that's how you lose it accidentally without knowing it, because you might have accidentally clicked it, and you just bring it back by doing this. In any event, I'm working with the table and I want to select my fields. And I have all my fields here, but watch what happens as soon as I click first. See, all of this is well and good if I choose this here, but the moment I hit add and then try to come back, okay, well, maybe I'm on a different tenant now because this wasn't working. What I was getting is a proverbial spinning like it didn't know what to do, and it was a problem. I know exactly what it was. Okay, good thing that I remembered this. If you do not type your untyped columns like you saw me do, I just wrapped it up. I don't want to show it again. If it is left of type untyped and you didn't cast it as value for integer or text, when you get to this step, when you do the table, now it makes sense. If you leave it as untyped, this preview can't handle untyped object. It won't explicitly convert. It just flips out and spins. So if you're using a table and you have an untyped object that you converted but you didn't explicitly type it, you're going to run into this bug or this issue, right? It's a fringe use case. Most of you, if not all of you, are probably will never run into it. So it does exist, but that's why. All right, now that being said, what I said I wanted to do is a gallery. So let's do a vertical gallery. I'm going to do the NF table data, and I want to change it to this. And now I can do this. Now I can start doing just like any other PowerFX, right? I can do ampersand, quote, quote. I'm going to put a space, ampersand. I'm concatenating, right? I could have used the concatenate function or concat. I always forget which one's which. But in any event, now I can add the last name. Do I not? Actually, you know what? I didn't add a last name. What's going on here? Yeah, I didn't add a last name. Dagnabbit. All right, well, let's fix that real quick. Copy. And let's copy this out. And this is going to be last name. Okay. And because this is untyped object, the way that it works, this is going to be very, 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 very helpful. Because now I can come back into here. And I can do this. Whoop. Come on, David. This item dot last. There it is. It's a snake and it bit me. Maybe I don't want the IP address. Maybe I want the email. No, I called it mail. And then instead of the identity, let's do IP address. Okay. All right. Anyway, so that's how we consumed it. We brought it in as JSON. Everything's well and good. We're going to insert our button. We'll just wrap up with this. Not inside of my table, David. And I just went too far. Insert button. Yes. Yes, there we go. Let's do JSON dot, or no, function, and then n table data. And now we're just going to look at the preview. I'll leave it there. So we can see we don't have any errors. Life's good. We have a typed object now with data types, and we can convert it back into a JSON. It's not escaped because it's treating it as an object, which is really good because you can then send this into a Power Automate function to receive the text. You can receive in from Power Automate a nice JSON string using the ParseJSON function, which I just showed you at for the majority of this video. And now between Power Apps and Power Automate and or whatever, you can send JSON, sling JSON around, which is really, really super helpful. It's also helpful in problems where you're having a delegation problem. Great example might be where, Power Apps can only handle up to 2,000 records. Maybe inside of Power Automate, you've got a use case where, I don't know, you got 10,000 rows, 10,000 records. Well, you use Power Automate to go to some API, to maybe SharePoint's API, pull out 10,000 records in your data set, and then you take that 10,000 JSON string, whoosh, and then you pop it and post it into there. So that's one use case on how you might be able to use that. And then you can do all this wonderful magic. And now you've got a way of dealing with stuff. You have the row ID, the record ID. Your Power App probably is going to be pretty slow if you got 10,000 records in it, but nonetheless, it is a way of circumventing the delegational rule. But as I can tell you, in 2024, knowing how to use JSON coming in and out of your app is essential. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for hearing me rant today. Hope you learned something. Please like, subscribe. Appreciate definitely trying to grow the channel. And, if you got some friends, wouldn't mind if you passed along and asked to have them subscribe as well. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye-bye.